Okay, we are live. So welcome to this live stream. Live streams are always interesting. You never know what's going to work and what's not going to work. Thought about doing a live stream bingo where we could have, squares for the stream getting interrupted, Adobe crashing, filler words, but that's not really where we want to have our focuses. so welcome to the stream. While we're waiting for people to hop in, then I thought I'd introduce myself a little bit so that you can know kind of where I come from, and then you'll know what I know what to do and what I don't know how to do. Set the expectations. So my name is Jeff Baird, and I've lived in Utah most of my life. I had a very magical childhood. I had a dad who really wanted to make things magical for us. So, for example, on Christmas Eve, when I was a little kid, he would crawl out my window on Christmas Eve in the dark on the roof to make sled tracks from Santa, so that when I'd wake up in the morning and look out the window, I could see the tracks from Santa. And so that was kind of the environment I grew up in. So we always loved the holidays, Halloween and Christmas, and doing kind of our own little amateur haunting. As an adult, we've done an amateur yard haunt for about 20 years. And for the first half of that, it was mostly physical props. They didn't have all the cool digital technology that we have now. So we were building props, physical ones with windshield wiper motors and things like that. And then we started dabbling in digital projection, but I'm kind of a cheapskate. I'm selectively cheap. And so there were a couple of guys, the kind of the OGs of projection mapping, that were starting to do full house projections, like Matt Champney of Digital Pressworks, Dave Bates, Jordan Nash. They're all Northern Utahns that were doing projection mapping before projection mapping was cool. So it was always interesting to kind of see what they were doing and see how awesome it was. But the two big barriers to me jumping in on that were the cost to get a projector that was going to work, and then the skill level to be able to do it. And so I never, up for a long time, I didn't jump into the water. I didn't jump into projection mapping. We did dabble with small projection scenes, get cheap small projectors and Atmos effects, things like that. Well, then 2020 comes along, and all of us are sitting around at home. We weren't sure if kids are going to be able to trick or treat, and so thought this is probably the year for us to try to do it. And I still don't know anything about the software side, but my nephew did. My nephew is in video production, and he's like, I know Adobe After Effects. I think we could put this together. And so 2020, what you're seeing here is the show that he designed. And he has an incredible high level of detail, very talented. This took him 5 months to build, in part because much of this is custom video effects, custom music compositions. Like a lot of the video effects are us, our family members, like the portraits there. So that was a lot of fun. And then I started taking over and caught the bug too. And so here we are 2 years later. And what I'm hoping to do, I get really inspired by this. I think it's a cool way of decorating. So what I'm hoping to do with our channel is to make this more accessible to more people. So we do lots of free trainings, tutorials, reviews to try to help make this more mainstream. It would be awesome if our whole neighborhood did this. I remember going down a street called Christmas Street when I was a kid with Christmas lights, mostly static back then, C9s, but the whole street would participate. So how cool would that be if all of us had something cool on our house like this? So that's a little bit about me. Some housekeeping items for this live stream. There is a 20-second delay, and that doesn't seem like much, but it becomes quite a bit when we try to have conversations or ask questions. So for the most part, let's wait till there's a nice clear breaking point for us to ask questions, or wait till the end, and then we'll try to answer all the questions all at once. Now, a couple of other things too. This demo is not for, this is not a beginner tutorial of Adobe After Effects. This assumes that you already know some about Adobe After Effects, but if you don't, if you're brand new to it, it's totally cool. We do have tutorials here on a playlist on our channel. And actually, much of what's here is what we'll cover today too. These are just broken into small mini tutorials, so they're very topical. So that you can just jump back in and say, hey, I can't remember how to do that particular thing. And then you can pop in here and figure out how to do it again. And so you can start there. We also have a comprehensive projection mapping course on projectionmappingacademy.com. And so those would be places that you could go to learn Adobe After Effects if you're new to it. And if you're new to projection mapping in general, I also have this playlist that I'm starting to build out of frequently asked questions so that you can have that context too. All right, let's see, anything else that we need to talk about? Oh, we also have a playlist of jams, music to listen to while you're projection mapping. It's very important, not to be underestimated. All right, so this particular live stream, it came out of a problem that I was trying to solve for our own shows, especially when I wanted to get video clips from movies that I liked. The movies were not designed with projection mappers in mind. I know that sounds strange, but they weren't thinking of us when they created the movie. And so what that means is oftentimes, you know, what we prefer as projection mappers is something that's from a stationary camera angle and perspective that stays on it for an amount of time that we can get a good video clip. Even better if it has a background that's easily removable. But movies usually jump around quite a bit. They'll have panning camera shots in a particular camera angle of a scene. They don't stay there for more than a second or two. So it can be difficult to capture a good usable video. And then we were trying to do a Pirates of the Caribbean ride and similar problem. You look at the footage of the ride and you don't get very long on each scene and you're constantly moving past the scene unless you get lucky enough to break down, I suppose. But then you have the boat moving around too, as well as sometimes the quality isn't very good from just their phones recording it. And so finding good video assets is a challenge. And so what I started doing for our Pirates of the Caribbean ride was just finding pictures that I liked and then seeing if I could, albeit simply, create some animation. And so like I had this picture of this guy. This one was really hard to find on the ride because you don't actually get to see him for very long and the boat's moving by pretty quick. So I took this picture and we turned it into, let's see, this is the scene itself. So the movement of his hair and his sash here and the wheel, all that was just pieced together from the picture. And then we put other layers in for the scene too. So this is the kind of stuff we're going to talk about today. Some simple ways that we can just take a still image that we like and then add some simple animation. And there's not going to be tons. There's 3 expressions, puppet pin, and then other than that, it's just some masking and keyframing to be able to do some things like this. So let's go ahead and get into it. I am going to kind of keep an eye on the chat in case there's some technical problems, but then I'll come back to it when we have questions. So let's get into it. All right, I've already got Adobe open, and this project's for our Stranger Things projection that we're working on right now, but I've got a selection of pictures here that we can try to add some simple animation to. So the first one I thought we'd try is just this peppermint and have it just spin. It's one that we used in our gingerbread show. And so I'm going to grab that picture and I can drag it down to this icon to create a pre-composition that matches the resolution and the properties of that image. And to get this to rotate, the property that I would want to change is called rotation. I can make it turn like this just by changing this property. And the way I started doing that originally before I knew easier ways of doing it was just to add a bunch of keyframes. Like I could click the stopwatch, move the playhead forward, rotate it, and then I would have a rotation, but it would only last for those 2 keyframes and then it would stop. And so then I'd start adding more and more keyframes. Not really ideal. So as an alternative to that, we can use an expression There's tons of expressions. I only know about half a dozen of them so far. There's an expression where we can just have this spin for the whole length of the video. To do that, we'll hold down the Alt key and then press this stopwatch next to rotation. And that brings up this other section where you can type in expressions. And so the expression we're going to use for this one is called time. And you can see with the prompt that there's a bunch of others. I haven't played with most of these. But this one's time. And then if you just do a times some number, like 100, then that's it. Now if I play composition, it's spinning. So super duper simple. And then you can put that pre-comp into your project, or you could even render it out as a separate video asset that you could reuse in other projects. And to see what this property does, let's try bumping up this to 500. And what we see that doing is it speeds it up. That's a really fast spinning peppermint. Maybe you could put it on the Wreck-It Ralph, one of those race cars that they have. So time, and then whatever metric you can put here is how quickly it's going to go. So if I slow that down to 30, now I have a slow rotation. Cool. So there's your first simple animation. Now for the next one, let's see, which one should we do next? Let's do, having a door open is popular, whether it's your front door or a window or the garage door. And so this one's pretty simple to do, and I think it's covered quite a bit, but I think we'll go through it again just for those that haven't done it before. For our Grinch show, we had this nice little Who house and wanted the door to open. And so the first thing I might do is just click this 3D checkbox to make it 3D so that I can open the door. But this isn't exactly what I want. I don't want the door frame and the steps turning with the two. I want just the door. And the pivot point is actually turning right in the middle of the door instead of where the hinges would be. So what we're going to do is a little prep work first. And usually the way this works is I create layers and masks to kind of separate the different components of the picture. I'm going to have portions of the image and the video at the end that are static, that are not going to change. And then I'll have a layer that actually has the movement and the animation. So let's start with, this is our first layer. I can do Control D to duplicate it. And I'm going to rename this one to be our door frame. That's the one that's going to be static and not change. And this one is going to be the actual door. And I am going to draw a mask around the door so that this image has just that. And for the sake of the live stream, I'm not going to worry about precision here. We'll just do a quick and dirty mask. Okay, we've got the mask of the door. And so if I hide this layer, we see we have just the door. If I hide this layer, I still have the underlying door. So I'm also going to copy that mask down to my door frame. But on this one, I'm going to make it a subtract mask. That way, if I hide this top layer, there's darkness there, nothing more. And then you can put things in there like Who's or the Grinch. Okay, so we got our two layers. And we got the door that we want to turn. I can now make that 3D and just turn it, right? But I still have that pivot point in the center left of the door instead of where the hinges would be. So the other thing I'm going to do is change the anchor point, which is this little crosshairs right here. That's where all the properties are going to be based from, that anchor point. So I can press A on my keyboard to bring up the anchor point and just shift these to get the anchor to where the hinges would be. And then since that moved the position of the door, I'll press P and just move the door back to where it was. Like so. Let me just up just a bit. Okay, so now when it's 3D, now it looks like it's opening. which is exactly what I want, right? Okay, and so then we can animate it, and you can do it however you want to with animating. If you want to have it at certain specific times, then you might just want to do manual keyframes, or if you want to have it be on a more periodic basis. I'm not sure why you do that with the door, but you could change it with an expression too to open and close at set cadence. And then the only other thing to do though, once it's keyframed, let's go ahead and throw a couple keyframes in. And I never remember which one. Okay, it's the Y. Perfect. Okay, so I'm going to put keyframe there, and let's open the door. And there we go. Got an opening door effect. Now, if we want it to close later, we can just add another keyframe and copy that original keyframe, and it will close. And the only other thing that we need to do is the door is hanging out here where it probably doesn't need to be. So we can just simply draw a mask now around this entire door layer so that when it opens, it doesn't show up over here. And I might just put it below the door frame too. Let's try that. There we go. Now it's below that layer and it's taking care of it for us because it's already got that mask. There you go. Now, as a side note too, some of these assets we're going to put up on the channel as well for free. And so that's what this playlist was here. We've got the Who door opening. We've got a few of the other assets that we're building if you don't want to have to repeat some of this. All right, plugging along. Let's move on to the next one. We're building the Stranger Things show. I'm going to delete some of these just to keep my workspace clear. And so we're building this Stranger Things projection. And so we've been finding all these pictures that might look cool if we have just a little bit of added movement. We've got these vines that we've been hanging inside of this tunnel where the demi-dogs run through. And so let's say we wanted to have these vines just kind of swinging slightly, like they're swinging in the breeze. Okay, we'll have to do some of the same things we did for the door. I need to change my anchor point to where I want them to swing. And then I can just do it the way we did before, but let's say this time I don't want to have to do all the keyframes. I want it to just kind of swing on its own. Then make sure I get the right, I always get the XYZ mixed up. Hopefully I'm not the only one. Let's have it just swinging back and forth like this, but doing it without having to do a bunch of keyframes. So we'll use another expression to do this. I am going to do, for the first way of doing this, I am going to create 2 initial keyframes. I'll create one at that position and one here. And then so I don't have to copy and paste a bunch of them, I'll press Alt and click on the stopwatch to open up the expression editor. And this time we're going to use a function called loop out. And it has a couple different parameters you can put in. In this case, we're going to use ping pong. And what that is going to do then is just oscillate ping pong back and forth between those 2 keyframes. Let's see how it looks. Oh, and I forgot my second keyframe actually. Let's Control Z is my best friend. Oh, I'm on the wrong one, that's fine. There we go. Now I got my keyframes and I can do the Alt, loop out, and ping pong. There we go. And now they're just swinging in the breeze. And to change the speed of these, I can just change the distance between those keyframes. If they're farther apart, they're going to swing slower, give a more kind of subtle look and feel to it. If I move them closer, they'll swing faster. Now, the only thing I don't like about this, though, is if I was really in the upside down tunnel, it wouldn't be so predictable, so cyclical, so it wouldn't be the same, it'd be random. And so another expression that we can use instead of loop out, ping pong is good if you want to have it exactly the same, if you want to have it swing back and forth between two values and not deviate. But if I want to have random, then what we can do instead, I think I can just take this keyframe off, and I don't think I need it for this one. And I'll double click on the expression and replace it with one called wiggle. Wiggle I use as a randomizer. So whatever property I'm playing with, this will randomize it. And it takes two numbers, two parameters. The first one is how fast it's going to make the change. And the second number is how much it's going to change. So if I put a 3 and a 100, let's see how fast and how much movement we get from that. Pretty fast, and it's moving quite a bit. So let's dial that down. It's kind of interesting that 3 is a pretty low integer, but that's still fast. Let's try 1, and we want more subtle movement. Let's just do like 40 in here. See how that looks. It's a little bit better, and it's random. So the randomness I really like. I use that in so many properties. I use it from lighting to make a fire flicker effect. I'll use the same expression or any other movement that we're trying to get to have that illusion of randomness. So then you can just kind of play with those numbers to get it looking the way that you want it to. And for that first number, you can do fractions. 1 is still pretty fast for a lot of the things I want. Sometimes I want it much more subtle. So you can do decimals, like 0.2, and now it's going to go much slower. Cool. All right, so we've already covered all 3 expressions that I wanted to, actually. So we're cranking, we're making good progress. Let's look at another effect, though, that we can do that's kind of fun, called the puppet pin. And so let's see, which image is it? I think it's Castle Byers. Castle Byers we have in one of our scenes. And I'm going to throw a layer behind it just so I can see it good. I don't want green, too obnoxious. I'll do dark green. Okay. All right, so we got Castle Byers. And what I thought would be cool is if we just had some subtle movement of this curtain, like it's blowing in the wind. It's one of those details that probably nobody notices in the show, but I notice, and I think it's fun and cool. And so we're going to make this curtain just move just a little bit with the wind. And we'll do it with the wiggle so that it's random. And then we're going to do it with a puppet pin effect. And the puppet pin is actually just sitting right up here on the toolbar. Just click on that. And then you're clicking on points that you want to move with this effect. I'm going to lower my resolution a little bit so I don't get bogged down. Like I said, I'm selectively cheap and my computer's not great. So I put kind of these points in it. And now if I click on one of these and move it, it warps the image. And so now we can put a keyframe on that and make some randomness. But hang on, his whole castle is warping. I don't want it to be his whole castle. I want it to be just the curtain. So let me back that out. And we will do layers just like we talked about in some of our other examples. I'll create a duplicate of this. I'll mask out the curtain. And copy that mask down to the solid layer, but make it a subtract. So this layer is going to be the wood castle part, and then this is the curtain. Check these layers, make sure it's good. Okay, that one is just the door and this one is just that. Perfect. All right, now I can go back and do that puppet pin again on just the curtain. A couple spots in there. And now that's wiggling. Now let's look to it at how many points you might want for a pin. Let's say I have just one. If I do that, then it's not actually warping because it doesn't have 2 points of reference to have that bend and that warping. So I'll need at least 2. If I do that, then the second one is moving kind of in relation to the first, which can give us a clue as to where we want to put our pins. So let's put a couple up here at the top. Yeah, it's kind of our anchor point. That's going to move less. And then down near the bottom, we'll get more movement. And so now I can kind of wiggle this one around. And that's looking a little more natural, where the top is moving less than the bottom is. Okay, so let's add the wiggle to that. It's going to be listed under effects, under puppet. You got to go through lots of nested layers for this. Mesh, deform, and then these puppet pins are the individual points that we'd added. And so let's make sure I got the right one. It's that one is puppet pin number 4. And I will do Alt stopwatch, wiggle. I want it pretty subtle. Maybe we'll try a 0.5. And I don't want it moving tons. Let's just try 30. See how it looks. Yeah, not too shabby for a couple seconds of work. So you can go back in and fine tune it to get it the way that you want it to look. You can put this wiggle on multiple of those pinpoints to get even more randomness and movement. And so then you got cool little detail, cool little animation, just a couple simple tools. Okay, what else can we do that would be fun? Quick time check, we're at about 10:30, so I want to make sure we have 15-20 minutes at the end for questions. I have a couple others that I've done. Maybe we'll do the pirate one next, because that one has lots of movement that we could do. So let's do this pirate scene. Famous pirate scene, the dog with the keys and the guy's trying to get him to bring the keys to him. And in the ride, but one nice thing about rides is the animatronics, especially the original ones, weren't super smooth anyway. So if my limited simple animation isn't super smooth, that's consistent, right? So in this scene, we have a couple different movement though. We have the dog that ends up moving his head. We've got several of their arms and heads that are moving. So in 10-15 minutes that we have, let's add as much movement as we can to these using what we've learned so far. So we'll have a couple different layers. We'll have our base static layer, which is all the stuff in the background that we don't want to move. We'll also have, let's name this one before I get too far ahead. Jail background. What we'll also run into is we've got these bars that are actually in front of the pirates. And so I think I'm going to want to actually create a layer for those bars. Otherwise, I'm masking out the whole arm with the bar, and then that kind of gives away the effect. And so I try when I look at these to really think about those layers as they'd be in real life and then duplicate them with the layers that we have. So I'm going to create one here on the top two. That's the bars of the gel. And so I'm going to hide these bottom ones for a second, and let's mask out those bars. I'll put my resolution just while we're doing that. Again, I'm not going to worry about precision here. Just get a couple simple masks. Oops. Let's hide this for a second so I can see what I'm doing. Okay, this one's interesting though because he's got his hand in front of the bar. So you got a layer of the background, a layer of the prisoners, a layer of the bars, and then a layer of their arms. But if I'm not going to move those portion of the arms, then that can be in that layer. It won't matter. So I'm not going to worry about that. I'll turn those back on in a sec. Let's just do a couple more of these real quick. This arm is going to move, so that's one that I do want to do as two separate masks. Oops, I didn't want to do none. Oh, I'm going to change those back later. The rope, that part will take a bit of precision that I'm not going to worry about for now. Okay, let's just do one more bar here for this one. Cool. These will all be add. So this layer has just the bars, nothing else. And then we've got the background, and then we're going to have the prism inmates. All right, let's start with this arm. It's going to be the easier of the one because it doesn't have the bar in the path. So let's move his arm like he's enticing the dog with the bone. Can create a mask around his arm. Where you can find these dark pictures too with dark background, then oftentimes that's easier, because one of the unintended consequences of doing this is we're going to leave a big hole there on our geo background. And so there's this big void when the arm moves. You'll see what I mean here in a second. All right, so right about there is what we want for his arm. And the mask I'm going to copy down to our bottom layer and have that be a subtract. So bottom layer, no arm, and this has just the arm. Cool. Need to change the anchor point on this really quick so that it is pivoting where I want it to. Where is my anchor point? Oh, there it is. Right about where his shoulder should hinge anyway. Try to put it back in its place. Right here, though, you can see how there's that gap behind it. So that's something that we're going to want to get creative with. Okay. And maybe while we're on that note, we'll talk about some ways that you can do it. This is leaving a big old hole there. That could look awkward. A couple things that we can do. You can play with the feathering on these masks, and sometimes that will make it less obvious, especially the one that's on the bottom layer. As I feather that, then it makes it at least less dark. The other thing that I'll do, if it's a simple scene, it worked good for the Grinch one, it might be harder for this one, is just adding some background layers that might blend in or at least make it less obvious. So if I do like a solid layer and with the eyedropper make it similar color to this, I'll put that at the bottom of my layers. All right, still looks kind of crappy, but you can sometimes on a simple one build some solid layers to hide the fact that there's a big hole there. And maybe once we start moving this, it won't look bad. Let's try rotating this and see. Yeah, that's at least better than darkness, especially if we do just a little slight movement of his arm. Okay, so we got his arm. Now we just do our expression like we talked about. Alt on the stopwatch for rotation, wiggle. Let's try 1 and 20. A lot of this is just kind of playing around until you get it looking the way that you want. Yeah, not bad. Good enough. We'll call that good enough. I'm gonna feather this a little more. Yeah, pretty obvious hole there that given enough time we could obfuscate, we could hide it. All right, then we can do the same thing for his arm, and it should work the same way because we have this bar layer on the top. Let's see if that's actually the case though. Arm 2. Quick and dirty mask. Copy and paste it down here and make it a subtract. Quick check. Yep. Okay, we're good. And then this arm, I need to get rid of this superfluous mask on this layer though, so that I get just this arm. And with the anchor point again, just rinse and repeat at this point, right? Put his arm back. And wiggle. And maybe his will be a little slower. Maybe we'll do 0.5 and 15. So his has less movement. There we go. Now we do have an anomaly here where the bar that's showing up on his arm is also showing up a little. If you get really particular, then on that layer, you might want to add some red or kind of this red and white pattern to kind of hide and obfuscate that. Okay, I think the rest of this would be just copy and paste. You could do that with the head of the dog. You can do it with his hand. You could then do it with some slight head movement. You know, by the time you get slight head movement, arms and dog, then you have basically what the ride has, which is really cool. All right, let's see if there's anything else before we move on to questions that I haven't covered. We did one with this bird, Dr. Seuss bird for Grinch, to make it flap. And so that was the same kind of a process. We masked out the wings separate, and then in 3D space, we had it moving on the shoulder hinge back and forth to make it flap. And then we just did some keyframes to have it fly across. So same kinds of things. I think all the rest of these are using the same patterns and strategies. So let's go ahead and see if there's any questions or if there's images that you're interested in trying something with while we have some time. And there's a 20-second delay, so I will sit here awkwardly while we wait for you guys to hear this and then type in some questions. Now, maybe while I wait, there's another problem that I've been trying to figure out how to solve for our community. You know, I want to help make this accessible and more easy for everybody. And finding the assets in the first place takes a lot of time. Finding pictures and videos takes a tremendous amount of time. And then doing all this prep work also is pretty tedious and takes time. And I'm a big fan of let's do it once and then reuse and not have a bunch of people reinventing the wheel. So I've been trying to figure out a way to make some of these things accessible. I've got tons and tons and tons of images and textures and little animations that we're making. Most of them aren't so polished that I would go and put it on a website for sale or anything, but they're great ingredients as you're building kind of your own shows. And so I've been trying to figure out how to do that. I've also been buying a lot of third-party tools to help with this, like DaVinci. I paid for their professional version because they had a thing to help remove backgrounds. And there's another tool I bought recently for $300 that will take videos and pictures to boost up, uses artificial intelligence to boost up the resolution. So what I'm thinking I'm going to try is utilizing Patreon that YouTube already has to set up some cheap ways to make these accessible for those that are interested in just using them and not having to do the work themselves. So I'll be launching that. I might be able to do it today. And I want to keep it cheap. Like there's a $3 a month tier for Patreon. And so I'll probably stick pictures and textures in there for people to use. Like I've got a bunch of these walls that that have different effects to them. That's just a little tedious to build yourself. So I'm going to make that available for the $3 tier. And then there's, I think the next one's a $9 tier. And so that's where I'll put some of the animations that we're doing. So if you see a cool one that you like, then you don't have to go build it yourself. And we'll continue to put a few free ones. We'll probably put quite a few free ones actually on the YouTube channel that you can just download for use there. All right, I don't see any questions coming in though. So hopefully that was helpful for you. And once again, if we're doing things that you weren't familiar with, that you haven't done yet, then there's the mini tutorials on our YouTube channel. And we actually did do a live stream that was an intro to Adobe. I don't remember when we did that, February. That's also on our channel. And so you can look at that too if there was anything that we did here today that you're like, hey, wait, I don't know how to do that piece. And then if there are no other questions, then we can end the live stream a little early. I'll give it just another second or two and see if I can see any in here. And let me check the Facebook event messaging too, see if anyone's typing anything in there. All right, got a question. What's the program that uses the AI? Oh, good question. It is Topaz Labs. Let me pull it up here. Topaz Labs, it uses artificial intelligence for picture and video. And so I bought the suite. We had tons of Grinch pictures that just weren't good enough. They weren't high enough resolution. So I bit the bullet and just bought the suite to kind of bump up the quality of them. And you know, some of us in the community were kind of talking about how can we, not all of us have to pay for this expensive software when there's tons of it. I don't know how much. I don't know if I want to know how much I've spent on software this year. So this is a way too that we can kind of help support each other in the community. I've already bought a lot of this stuff, so if there's things that you guys want, then this Patreon might be a way that we can make it accessible and help spread out the cost as well. Okay, I don't see any other questions, so we'll call that good. And feel free to reach out to me after this. Facebook's probably the easiest way. I'm in the holiday projection mapping group with most of you, and so you can just message me there if you have follow-up questions. And thanks for attending today. Hope that was helpful.